So former President Trump did a big, supposedly town hall, but the hall didn't actually ask any questions, but with Sean Hannity last night, our producer Griffin pulled some of the most interesting moments from the evening. When he got a question, this was kind of elicited an interesting response about the contrast between the 2016 campaign and this campaign. Let's take a listen to how he responded.
2016 was about the forgotten man and forgotten woman. What is 2024 about?
So it's not that different. It's still about the forgotten man and the forgotten woman. The people are being treated horribly in this country. We're a country that's being laughed at all over the world. And I'll be honest, if Joe Biden would be a great president, I would be happier than being the worst president in the history of our country, because I want to see what's good for the country. And I would have been very happy. I have very nice places I could be. This is not easy. I got shot at, you know, I mean, I got hit. I got hit. I could have been all over that place. I could have, but you know what? It's very simple, and it starts with make America great again. That's what we have to do.
What'd you make of that, Saagar? Because, I mean, it's just, listen, back in 2016, there was a lot there in terms of, you know, talking about trade, talking about the Iraq war. Like, it was credible to say this is about the forgotten man and woman. It's not credible anymore. I mean, your biggest agenda item in the first term was this giant tax cut largely for rich people. The type of people you put, we were talking about this earlier, that you put in your cabinet in key positions of power, like Wilbur Ross, who's known for buying up and selling off steel companies, the polar opposite of what you said your priorities were gonna be. Your National Labor Relations Board was all about crushing workers. So, and this time around, there just isn't even a lot of rhetoric around the quote unquote forgotten man and forgotten woman. So I don't know that that's very credible at this point.
Okay, you and I may know that, but a lot of people don't know that.
Of course.
How many people are looking at policy or NLRB, or who knows who Wilbur Ross is? Only people who follow very closely. So look, in a certain sense, this was his best strength. I think that would be the best thing that he could, quote unquote, lean into. If you listen to many of the interviews that J.D. Vance gives, for example, this is a lot more what it is. And I do, if anything, I'm gonna read it this way. Hannity seems to be clear that he believes like Trump has maybe lost his step, and he's like, maybe we should come back to the forgotten man, right? And we should come back to some of that rhetoric, and that seems to be where you thrive the most. So he talked to there. I mean, look, immigration is probably his best issue. It's probably the issue that resonates most with a lot of working class issues, that a working class base that he has so far. That's what he probably should be talking about, where it's at his best. So the forgotten man thing is very powerful whenever you want to embrace it. This time around, though, and I mean, look, he did a lot of this in 2020. It's very anti-left. Now, that can work. Let's be real. Like, it's potent. And it is one that is actually more unifying to the Republican coalition. It's a lot of these people are communists. These people
Kamala's a communist,
destroy you. Exactly. And actually, that's much more unifying in terms of like the Republican electorate, because you've got people who, you know, small business owners or whatever, who all they care about is low taxes. And then you've got working class voters who they don't care about that at all. They're animated about immigration, or they're animated about trade, or, you know, many variety of other things. But they also kind of hate cultural leftism. So this campaign to me seems much more about like cultural, like capital L liberals, and being anti that. And that is potent. I mean, you can easily win the White House. I think that's what we learned in 2020 whenever he did all that last time. And it's quite clear it could work against Kamala Harris as well. I preferred the forgotten man stuff.
Yeah.
But that's not really
what you're describing is just a very standard Republican playbook.
Yes.
It's just very like, you know, Mitt Romney could have been launching these same sort of attacks against whoever, and you know, whether it's Kamala or Joe Biden or Barack Obama or Bill Clinton, whoever it is. At some point, they've all been called communists by Republicans. So it's just, it's a very sort of typical Republican playbook. They also, obviously the subject of Kamala Harris did come up, and Sean Hannity made a joke about, you know, the brevity of her interview with CNN. Now, when you're Sean Hannity and you're doing an incredibly softball interview with Trump, I don't know that you have a lot of leg to stand on, but in any case, let's take a listen to that exchange.
If you watch that interview, she had notes. That means she knew the questions, and she had notes. She kept looking down, up. Nobody wants to cover it. I know all about notes. I mean, you know, it's all right if people know that, but she wasn't supposed to have notes. So she's asked a question. She looks down. She keeps on. She had notes. That means she knew that she knew what was happening.
Did her campaign, when they said that they wanted to change the rules that they had agreed to, Did they ask for notes? Did they ask for the?
They wanted notes.
They wanted to be seated, and they wanted your mic hot.
And they wanted a desk. I'm not going to allow it. You can't take the chance. You have no choice. You've got to vote for me. You've got to vote for me. You got to. Even if you don't like me. But even if you don't like me, you can sit there and say, I can't stand that guy, but there's no way I'm going to vote for her.
I actually think that last part is kind of revealed. That actually is his core strategy.
Yeah.
Is, listen, my favorability rating, it's not going to come up. It is what it is. I need to get some people who don't like me to hate her even more. And that's the goal between here and Election Day. Now, so far, they haven't done a very good job of that. Her approval rating has gone up tremendously. But, you know, even though in some ways the time is very short between now and Election Day, in another way, it's very long. And so his goal is going to be to push up that number of double haters and be able to try to win a majority of them in the way that he did in 2016. And so that's his pitch, is basically like, listen, you may not like me, but you got no choice. You can't vote for her. She's incompetent. She needs the notes, et cetera, et cetera. That really is kind of his core bet in terms of how he can win.
I don't think it's a bad strategy either. Remember, in 2016, he had a 35% approval rating, and he still won some 48-something% of the vote. 2020, his approval rating was actually lower, and he won 10 million more votes than the last time around. The double hater thing is actually strong. And coming at it head on, I kind of like it, because at this point, what? Trump has been in our lives since 2011. He's been a national political figure. Nobody is like, you know, I don't know what I think about this guy. There are a lot of people who hate him, but there are a lot of people who will hold their nose and will also vote for him, as we've learned 2 times around now. So this time, this whole, look, you know, you may not like me, but you can't vote for the other guy. That's powerful. That's what happened with Biden in 2020. So again, I don't love this, like, for the country. I don't think this is healthy, but from an objective standpoint, I think it can be powerful, and it's not a bad one in particular for, let's think about like the conservative, like moms and dads who are making, let's call it like 200 grand a year. These people don't really like Trump. They're much more Mitt Romney folks. They're lifelong Republicans, love McCain, love Romney, but they don't really like Kamala Harris either. Some of them have actually been voting for her, but this time around, they're like, well, I'm just not so sure. And they hear something like that, maybe it's persuasive. It's possible. At least puts it in your head. And it's definitely one that a lot of their neighbors and others, this is where I think the biggest conflict is over that Liz Cheney type voter, right? Yesterday, she endorsed Kamala Harris, by the way. Congratulations. She said, she's like, it's too much, you know, to even write in a swing state. The stakes are just too high. So I'm voting for Kamala Harris. But that fight is playing out in a lot of these upper middle class Republican circles. And that's the logic that I often hear, you know, from those types of people. They're like, I don't even like him, but I am going to vote for him.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's the existential type of, you know, stakes. And like I said, I think if it's going to work, he's got to be more effective. They got to find some ways to ding her up more effectively, because right now her approval rating is in positive territory in most polls, which is actually pretty unusual for a modern politician at this time. The thing that he was saying about, you know, the notes and trying to undercut her credibility and disqualify her, that hasn't worked so far. We showed that poll earlier in the week. More people found her to be qualified to be president than him. So he's got some work to do if he's going to bring her favorability numbers. But, you know, they've got a lot of ad spending plans, and he's doing his interviews and getting out there and doing his thing. So I have no doubt that by the time Election Day rolls around, some of that will land and her approval rating will take a hit between now and Election Day.
I mean, it has probably nothing to do with her. People are going to make up their minds and they get hardened before the election. That's just how it goes. In terms of...
But I do think he missed a key window here. Like, they waited too long.
I said that from... I go, hey, what are we doing here? You know, even this. Sorry, why are we on a Sean Hannity Fox News interview? What is happening?
Right, preaching to the choir.
Yeah, Sean... His whole audience is voting for Trump. Right. Like, okay.
Right.
Also, Sean didn't even give him any questions from the town hall, which would have allowed them to go viral and can be covered, right? Because that's where the most interesting exchanges are. Now, this is the thing, too, with Trump and the podcast strategy. At the very least, you're getting clips of that are going viral because they're different. So Trump, in general, does better, actually, I think, in adversarial interviews. This is another thing. I've been watching JD's media calendar. It's all adversarial. Almost none of it is friendly. He's going on the New York Times, The Interview podcast. That's going to be great, right? You're going to have like Michelle Goldberg, folks like that, like ultra Russiagate libs, literally up against JD. I can guarantee you there will be some decent content that comes out of that. Trump needs to put himself more into that space because I think he actually does better in some sort of a challenging environment as opposed to this just fluid nonsense, right? And I'm sure it's comfortable. And I get that from a human level. It's probably comfortable to sit there and BS with Sean Hannity. But electorally, I don't see it. I don't see it for him.
Me neither. I don't understand the strategy. Like, I'll say this delicately because you have personal friends with JD, but he's the least popular person out of the four of these individuals. Why is he campaigning more than you are? Why is he the one out doing the interviews?
By the way, it doesn't.
I know you don't disagree.
It doesn't hurt my
I mean, that's
feelings.
just the facts and the numbers.
It's America's job to decide what they think about JD. I don't agree with them, but that's fine. You know? And I don't agree with America on a lot.
Right. So, like, okay, you're putting your weakest asset in terms of how people feel about this guy out front to do like the heavy lifting of the campaign. Meanwhile, you're going on. I think he's really convinced himself. Like in the Lex Friedman podcast interview, which was atrocious, by the way, but we'll save that for another day. He mentioned how many views his Twitter Spaces with Elon Musk got. And I was like, you're really buying those numbers? You really believe that had some sort of like massive traction and was really an incredible benefit for your campaign? It was a disaster. You guys will remember. How long did it take? We couldn't get on. The tech failed. Once it did, it sounded like crap. He was slurring. That was, the microphone or whatever issue was going. But it sounded terrible, okay? And the numbers on that, anyone with a brain knows is total, complete, made-up bullshit. So I think he's really convinced himself of this strategy. And I said this before, but, look, I would like it if the alternative media sphere was more powerful than it is, but it ain't. Look at Andrew Yang and how his campaign went that was largely an online, like, let me go on all the podcasts and do the thing campaign. Look at Vivek Ramaswamy, who also had this very online, let me go on all the, alternative media, right, left, whatever, podcast and do the thing. He was at 4% in the polls. So, Trump really understands television, I don't think he understands the alternative media space at all. I don't think that the strategy makes any sense. I think he or his advisors or whoever have convinced them that this is way more powerful than it ultimately is. And then you're spending your time doing this Sean Hannity interview to a friendly audience that already knows, loves, and is going to vote for you. None of it is very logical.
I'll flip it. I think the podcast thing is great as long as it's additive, as long as you're doing both.
Right, but he's really not.
All right, but that's what I'm saying, is that he needs to do, I think, more adversarial stuff. And actually,
they're not even really doing a lot of he didn't even campaign on Labor Day.
Very odd.
To the forgotten man thing. And you're trying to drape yourself in working people and trying to win more of the union vote, and you don't even campaign on Labor Day? That's crazy.
So I'm looking at his schedule. I believe he's got He's got a rally that is this weekend in Wisconsin. After that, let's see. JD will give a speech in Phoenix, Arizona. I think that's today. And there will be, quote, an Agenda 47 policy tour that is in Milwaukee featuring Doug Burgum and a bunch of other people I've never heard of. So, okay. All right. That's what's on the schedule for today. Right now, he's going to Wisconsin, which, that actually makes sense electorally. But look, in general, I think he needs to work harder. I think he needs to flood the zone. And this is the other thing. 2016, Trump actually genuinely flooded the zone. And this is where the podcast strategy can be genuinely additive. We'll see what they do. Maybe he wants to take some time to prepare, prepare for the debate, which is coming up. That would be kind of natural.
That would be a first.
And human.
That would be a first.
Be interesting.
That he wanted to prepare for a debate. He doesn't normally do that.
I think he needs to work harder. I think JD's strategy is much more effective, actually. And it would be 10x more effective with Trump, who's just with the most dynamic figure in modern American politics. So look, I'm not running this campaign.
Yeah, I mean, and let me just say, we'll
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about Kamala and the poll block, but I don't think that their strategy is particularly good either.
Yes.
They have, Tim Walz is very popular, and where is he on all of these
He doesn't even take
shows?
questions from freaking local media. What is going on with
they actually have a really tremendous asset in Tim Walz. He has sort of set the most effective parts of their campaign. We're about to show you a Sean Hannity clip with regard to Tim Walz in terms of, the weird thing, which whether you like it or not, I think it is way more effective than the over-the-top, grandiose moralizing about Trump. The sort of laugh at him, roll your eyes at him, I think is a way more effective strategy. The more populist elements of his policy, when those have been highlighted, I think those have been some of the best parts of your campaign. And he's not out here doing cable news interviews. They're shying away from talking about some of the most popular parts of their economic policy. She's too afraid to do interviews of any, significance or quantity. So it's not like I think that their strategy is great either. So let me be clear about that.
Well, no, you're right. I think the reason why they don't do it is because if he did interviews, then they'd be like, well, why doesn't your boss do interviews? And then that's ultimately what it's about. Also, they don't want to make news on anything. They don't want to clarify anything. I'm like, so what do you believe on the capital gains tax? Your advisor said this. Do you believe in the EV mandate? Yes or no? Because recently, apparently the answer is now no. Or maybe it's not. What is your reaction to the, did you watch that? The clip where they asked him, they're like, hey, what do you think about Hamas murdering those 6 Israeli hostages? He's like, all right, thanks everybody. That was it. It's like, come on, bro.
Yeah.
You want to be vice president or with Kamala. What is happening here? So yeah, let's not also leave them off the hook because, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so let's, we'll get to more on that when we get to the polling piece, but here is a question and answer with regard to Tim Walz and the quote unquote weird allegations. Let's take a listen.
Let me play Kamala.
There's something weird with that guy. He's a weird guy. JD is not weird. He's a solid rock. I happen to be a very solid rock. We're not weird. We're other things perhaps, but we're not weird. But he is a weird guy. He walks on the stage. There's something wrong with that guy. And he called me weird. And then the fake news media picks it up. That was the word of the day. Weird, weird, weird. They're all going. But we're not weird guys. We're very solid people that want our country to be great again. I mean, it's very simple.
See, I think he's, in a certain sense, making a Hillary 2016 mistake, which is when...
What, Streisand affecting it?
Yeah. And, now they have set the terms of the debate. It's impossible to disprove a weird allegation. And the more you're saying the word, the more you're validating the frame. So, I think it's been effective, an effective attack on them. I think they have not dealt with it well. And I think the more they talk about it, the more it sort of gets ingrained in the psyche and the association with the term.
I mean, I'll just compare. JD doesn't talk about it at all. Every time they ask, he just laughs and he's like, okay, whatever, next question. I actually think it's probably more effective, right, than doing this. I don't disagree with you. We have the last clip here from Trump about World War III and nuclear weapons. Let's take a listen.
Everybody was afraid of Trump. You bring him back, you're not going to have any problems. It's all going to go away. The world is blowing up. The world is blowing up.
Hey, this brings...
And Sean, one thing?
Yeah.
The world is blowing up. And when you look at Ukraine and you look at Russia, you look at all the things that are happening, we are potentially getting ready. I'm telling you, and I've made a lot of predictions, and this is not a prediction because it's so bad. I don't want it to be a prediction. We're heading into World War III territory. And because of the power of weapons, nuclear weapons in particular, but other weapons also, and I know the weapons better than anybody because I'm the one that bought them and, we rebuilt our entire military.
All right. I mean, look, the World War III stuff, I actually think it would be better if he was campaigning on it more. This is the other problem, too, with every time he's asked about Ukraine, Israel, or any of these other things, Afghanistan, it never would have happened if it wasn't for me. And while I get that that's an attractive answer, at a certain point, you kind of do need to have a little bit of detail or offer something or offer, because right now he's all over the map. We're pro-Israel, and on Afghanistan, he's like, well, I would have kept a base in Bagram. I'm like, well, then you never actually believed in ending the war in Afghanistan, just so you know, in terms of what that means.
So you're actually not anti-war.
Ukraine, he's like, well, it's like, well, okay, well, now what? You say that the deal will be ended. The war will be ended by the time you're president-elect. Great, but what is that going to entail? What if Putin doesn't agree to your deal? Then what? Is Ukraine ever going to be allowed into NATO under your watch? Yes or no? These are all questions that genuinely need answers. So look, I think being anti-war in 2016, especially on Iraq, and in contrast to Jeb Bush and the rest of the party, was so effective. And I don't see that from him as much these days.
Well, there's a real risk, like a real world risk. We talked about like foreign influence, whatever. Bibi Netanyahu would much rather have Trump in the White House. And he's trying to drag us into a broader Middle Eastern, like regional war as we speak, and has long desired that, but knows that that would be a problem for Kamala Harris. And, so while I don't think that this talking point from Trump, which again, he's not anti-war, I mean, obviously there's layers and layers of propaganda here, et cetera. It's not even clear where he stands on a variety of these issues. It is clear that he's way more, like even more pro-Israel somehow than Joe Biden is. But, this talking point, I don't think today wins the day, but if we find ourselves in some bigger,
bigger problem,
conflict with Iran and flare up in the Middle East, which is surely you can lay the blame for that at the feet of Joe Biden and his Vice President Kamala Harris, this talking point becomes much more salient, and there's a lot of risks here, completely avoidable, just focus on the politics, let alone the morality, completely avoidable risks here that the longer that Biden has allowed Bibi to jerk his chain and do whatever the hell he wants with zero consequences, the more those risks escalate, and that's where we are.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.